I'm Allison Jonjak, the Cranberry Outreach Specialist with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension. These videos are the on-demand recordings of UW Extension and the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association's virtual brown bag lunch series. These monthly sessions offer growers and researchers a way to share timely and relevant information. We hope you'll enjoy and continue to engage with us.
Hi, everyone. My name is Grant Holly. I'm the Executive Director of the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association. We are very happy to be able to partner with UW Extension to bring you the research needed to be able to navigate our ever-changing environment. I'd like to thank all of our speakers today for their valuable time and leadership, the growers for joining us, and Allison for being the catalyst from which all of these sessions rely. Thank you so much.
So good morning and transitioning over to good afternoon, everyone, as we begin our March 21st, 2025 Cranberry Virtual Brown Bag. We are, as usual, in the growing season, we focus on agronomic topics, and in the non-growing season, or the ice is almost off, or the surprise snowstorm last night season, we get to hear from some of our other experts. So today we're going to have Katie Ghantous, the horticultural advisor of the Cranberry Institute, as well as Chris Slechta, the safety and loss control manager for Rural Mutual Insurance Company. Katie is going to go over a lot of IR4 and new pesticide updates with us, and then Chris is going to go over farm exemptions, farm non-exemptions, CDL, trucking equipment versus sand versus crop, and all these other kinds of questions. So I'm really grateful for both of their expertise. Is Grant with us today to give a quick welcome from the Growers Association? If not, I will give a quick welcome both from UW-Madison Division of Extension, who supports our virtual brown bags, as well as all other kind of grower outreach and professional development. The Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association supports us as well. And in terms of housekeeping, if we have questions over the course of the session, since Katie's topics and Chris's topics are a little bit different, we're probably going to have separate Q&A for Katie after Katie's session, and then Q&A for Chris after Chris's session. If you have questions, either feel free to unmute yourself and ask. You can type a question into the chat, or you can use the drop down to say, ask this question to Allison Jonjak, and then I can ask that question anonymously on your behalf. There are transcripts, and if you need to view those transcripts, there's that ... more, and you can turn on the closed captions. And other than that, if you want to keep yourself muted unless you are asking a question, I think we're good to dive in, and I will stop sharing my screen and have Katie dive into the wonderful world of pesticide updates and IR4.
Hey, hopefully you can all see my screen. Okay. I was lucky enough to meet some of you folks this summer when I made it out there for your field day in August. That was really nice. For those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Katie Ghantous. I am a weed scientist at the UMass Cranberry Station, but I am also the hort advisor for the Cranberry Institute. So I do a lot of work with pesticides, with the registrants, with EPA labeling and things like that. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an update about some things that are happening in the regulatory world. So registration review is the process that EPA takes for every registered pesticide at least every 15 years. So some of our pesticide products, things like Passeron, have been registered for decades. When they were registered, our understanding of the science behind those pesticides, how they worked, how they interacted with human health and the environment, may be out of date now. So the EPA started this registration review process where they're revisiting every pesticide to make sure that it can still carry out its intended function. So it's effective without creating unreasonable adverse effects to human health and the environment. And this process has a lot of different steps. There's a work plan, there's a data call-in. So if the EPA has identified any gaps or additional information they need, it's really on the registrant to do that research and to provide that information. They'll do risk assessments, and then they will come out with a proposed interim decision. So say they'll say, this is what we'd like, how we'd like to change the label, or this is what we're planning on doing to address any risks that we identified. And then there is an interim decision. So at a lot of these points, we have the opportunity to see these drafts and to make comments on behalf of the Cranberry Institute, and that is what we do. So to make this whole process even more complicated now, the Endangered Species Act comes into play. Now, the Endangered Species Act has been around for 50 years. I think last year it had its 50th anniversary, and we haven't really talked much about it in the pesticide world until recently. All of a sudden, it's at the top of every conversation regarding pesticides. And the reason for this is that EPA has been sued by many NGOs, and it was found that they were not doing enough to address endangered species. Now, when they do these registration reviews, they do ecotoxicology and environmental impacts for all species, but this is really bringing the focus on endangered species. So they have to work closely with National Marine Fisheries and Fish and Wildlife to identify the species that are in jeopardy and then create mitigations that will protect those species. And it's very complicated. It's really unique to each pesticide. So how the pesticide works, what species are at risk of jeopardy from that pesticide use. And the current process that they were doing, it was taking between 4 and 15 years for a single pesticide to go through this endangered species process. So EPA is really trying to speed things up, make it more effective. They're creating frameworks. And the idea behind these frameworks is that similar chemicals will need similar mitigation. So for the herbicide strategy, we've seen a draft of and now a final version. They released an insecticide strategy, and eventually, maybe sometime this year, we'll see a fungicide strategy. And again, these are kind of, they don't change the labels. These strategies are not action items. They're a lens through which EPA is going to view pesticides when they're going through the regular registration and registration review processes. So the goal of all of these endangered species mitigations are really to minimize the off-site, off-movement target of pesticides. And, it's not that different from a grower's goal. You're spending a lot of money on these chemicals. You want them to stay on your field. You want them to stay where you put them into work. So ways that pesticides can move off target are by soil erosion or surface water runoff. And these are actually very similar processes. Because soil erosion most often occurs in the surface water runoff. So these are kind of, these have been lumped together and through spray drift. Now for cranberry growers, we are pretty fortunate because of the nature of the way cranberry farms are constructed. Because our fields are flat, we're not growing on hills, we have dikes, we have ditches. Any surface water that would leave your application area is going to run off into your ditch and stay contained in the system. So we're basically exempt from having to worry about the surface erosion, soil erosion and surface water runoff, which is really one of the most problematic things for many other crops. But for us, this is almost negligible. The thing that we do have to worry about is spray drift, and drift is the root of off target movement that we need to worry about in the cranberry industry. Now, I mentioned before that we have the opportunity to provide comments at a lot of these points in the registration review process. And when all kinds of things come out of the EPA, like these different strategies here. And Cranberry Institute is really starting to move the dial with our education efforts. So when you think about EPA, when you think about pesticides, when you think about the registrants, they're worried about things like corn and soy and wheat, things that grow in like thousands and thousands of acres and use lots and lots of pesticide products. We are a specialty crop. I like to say we're the most special of the specialty crops because really nothing grows like cranberry. So a lot of times it's just an oversight. We're just not part of their big picture when they're coming up with these strategies and these pesticide labels. And what the Cranberry Institute does is it gives us a seat at that table by reviewing these documents, providing comments. We're able to say, hey, what about cranberry? This is actually how cranberry grows. This is not how cranberry grows. This is what we're doing. This is not what we're doing. And things like in the mitigation measures, they had cover crops because they say that will reduce erosion and drift in some cases. And, our point was, well, we're a perennial crop and we have continuous ground cover. Shouldn't that count for something? So we got this language added to the mitigation measures, which is good. This is just an example of how our comments are important and they do matter. When we're talking, I'm going to talk a little bit more about spray drift and the ecological risks from them. So when we're talking about spray drift, the most common one of the main ways that they're implementing to mitigate this is by implementing buffers. So what a spray buffer is really just an unsprayed area between the edge of your field where you're spraying and where the sensitive non-target organisms are. In most cases, and almost all the labels I've seen so far, it's always a buffer to aquatic habitat, ponds, rivers, streams, things like that. But it's not necessarily to aquatic habitat. And I think in the future, we're going to start to see wording like buffers to meadows, buffers to forests. It really depends on what the pesticide is, what it can injure or kill, and where those organisms are going to be. So a buffer is just the area between where you're spraying and where they're trying to protect. We're going to see some broad measures on all pesticide labels as they go through registration and registration review. For ground boom applications, you're going to see language on there that will say do not release at a spray height greater than X amount of feet, usually 2 to 3 feet. Again, this might vary from label to label or product to product. You're going to have to select nozzles that deliver medium or coarser droplets. There'll be wind speed restrictions and do not apply during temperature inversions. And also, in addition to those other type of mitigation restrictions, you're going to see these buffers on there. So for ground application, it's typically between 15 to 50 feet. But again, this is really dependent on the chemical, how toxic it is, and to the organisms that they're trying to protect. Now, this is not so relevant to you folks, so I'll go through this part quickly. I know you don't really use chemigation at all in Wisconsin, but just another example of how we are really not part of the EPA's field division unless we make it. They are considering chemigation systems, and in the Midwest, this is probably something that you folks see in your area all the time. These big center pivot systems, they can take days to go around. They use thousands of gallons of water. None of these systems capture the chemigation system that's used by Cranberry. It's just not part of their equation. So we've done some education with them, talking about how we use solid set systems, that our systems are really optimized for frost protection and irrigation. We have these large droplets. We're injecting over minutes, not over days. Our pesticides only going out in 400 to 600 gallons of water per acre, not thousands, and that this type of chemigation is different from everything else and should be considered differently than other ground application methods. So how is the EPA going to implement these endangered species protections? The way that they're going to implement them is on new labels. So they're not going to happen all at once. You're not going to be bombarded with a million things that you have to worry about. As each product gets registered or goes through the registration review process, and for cranberry, that's sometimes less than one product a year. On those new labels, after they go through that process, we're going to start seeing broad measures listed directly on labels. So those, broad buffers, you're going to see those medium or coarser droplet nozzles, things like that. And then there's going to be more specific measures that you're going to see in bulletins. And you folks in Wisconsin have a little bit of experience with this with the Intrepid label, which is not something that's on anybody else's radar. But these are going to be this language is going to be on almost every single pesticide label eventually. And again, not all at once. They're going to start trickling through as each pesticide churns its way through the registration review process. And what these bulletins do is that they apply mitigations in a specific area, so where a listed species is present, and in some cases only during certain times of year. So here's an example of the Intrepid language label, and on here there's some language that will say endangered species, blah, blah, blah. To obtain this bulletin, no more than 6 months before using this product, consult this website. Now, that website is actually not even accurate anymore, but this is what is on the label. I think if you go here, you have to click through a bunch of steps to get to the actual bulletin at this point because they've updated it so much. But the label is the law. And if you see this type of labeling on a pesticide product, you must, as part of the label, check this website. Even if you've checked it 500 other times before and your farm is not in one of these pesticide use limitation areas, you still have to check it. And the reason is this is not a stagnant thing. They are constantly updating these bulletins, they are updating the maps. we don't really have a system in place. I was talking with the state regulators in Massachusetts about this. They've been asking EPA that to give them a heads up when these maps change so they know. And this whole thing is kind of in its infancy. We are learning as we go. The regulators are learning as they go. And, I think the more people are using it, the more these bulletins come out, this is going to change. And I think that's kind of the point. But anyhow, so if you go onto this map, you have to find your farm on the map, your exact farm, and look at it. And if you are in one of these areas, this yellow circled area here, then you are in a pesticide use limitation area, and you must go check the bulletin for more details. You can see here when you go in, I selected the month of April for my application month. I just picked a random month. But in some cases, there'll be a bulletin for April, but not for May, or one for June, but not for July, depending on what they're protecting, where those species are, and when those protections need to be in place. So this all kind of comes together now, the registration review piece and the endangered species piece with the chlorothalonil label. So chlorothalonil, we saw a proposed interim decision for this. We made lots of comments on it, and now we have seen a newly released interim decision. So at this point, the interim decision came out in early January. The registrants had 60 days to change their labels. So it was, I think, March 6th or something like that, and give those labels to EPA. EPA is reviewing those labels. They will stamp them, and we will see new product labels coming out anytime now, really. I don't know how quickly it's going to go, considering there's lots happening with the federal government at the moment, but we could potentially see new chlorothalonil labels anytime now. So the interim decision on chlorothalonil, we were worried that we were going to lose this product. There is some real baggage with it. It's been in the crosshairs in Canada. They've proposed canceling lots of uses for it. We really didn't know until we saw the interim decision that cranberry is going to retain its use, but there are some changes coming to the label. So this is good news for us. Overall, it's mostly good news. The health risks for chlorothalonil are from drinking water exposure, groundwater contamination. It is a known groundwater contaminant. This is something we've known for a while, and it's not surprising that the EPA is trying to address this. The way that they're trying to address the risks to human health are by lowering the maximum annual allowable amounts for all uses. So not just cranberry, but all uses across the board are being lowered. The per application rate is unchanged. So your use pattern for an individual spray is not going to change, but your overall seasonal max is what is being reduced. Now, originally, I know you folks don't face fruit rot the same way that other regions do, and perhaps this is not a super important compound to you, but currently, the maximum was 15 pounds AI per acre per year, and a grower could apply up to 3 full rate applications. What they've proposed and what is going to be implemented, the new maximum, they've cut this to either 10 or 6.5 pounds of active ingredient per acre per year. And whether you can go with the 10-pound cap or the 6.5 cap depends on whether you have a vulnerable soils or not. We'll talk about this in another minute. And so according to the new labels, you are going to be limited to 2 full rate applications or 1 full rate app if you are on those vulnerable soils. Now, for us, this was a big win for cranberry. We were able to go in and really clarify the groundwater risks for cranberry. The issue is that if you have a chemical that's highly mobile in water and does not break down in the absence of light, it can contaminate drinking water. And if you have sandy soils, you don't have organic matter to bind up the pesticide, that water can flow very quickly down to the groundwater. Think about dumping a bucket of water on sand. It just disappears immediately. We have sandy soils. Sandy soils are considered vulnerable. But here's the point where we could go in and do some real education here. Cranberry beds can be flooded, and in order to hold the flood, they really have to be isolated from the groundwater. If they're not, think about dumping a bucket of water on the sand, it just disappears. So for beds that are, have these peat bottoms, sometimes they're 75, 200, however many feet of peat are underneath there. That is a water confining layer. It enables you to hold a flood. And if any water did trickle down and leave your system, it's passing through all this rich organic matter that's going to bind up your pesticides. So even though we have sand on top, we made the argument that we should not be considered sandy soils. And in the case where you have an upland bed that's been constructed, in order for that to be able to hold water, it has to have a confining layer. We call that a perched water table. So again, sand on top, but that doesn't necessarily mean the water's going straight into the groundwater like it would in a regular sandy area. So again, this was a big win for us. We were successful in making this argument. We got them to change the label. So what you're going to see now is it's going to say don't apply more than 6.5 pounds active per acre per year in vulnerable soils. But then it's going to say peat bottom cranberry beds or upland marsh cranberry beds with a confining layer for flooding that isolates the cranberry bed from the groundwater are not considered vulnerable soils. And then you can go with the higher 10 pounds active per acre per year. And so this is, again, part of the education that we at CI try to do with the registrants and with EPA. Other changes coming to the chlorothalonil label, we're going to see buffers. The buffers were on the label, but they were only for estuary or marine habitats. And now the buffers on chlorothalonil labels are going to be for all freshwater habitats. So for ground application, it will say do not apply within 25 feet of water. For aerial applications, it's 150 feet. I know there's some interest out there in using UAVs for pesticide application. There is a lot of work being done by registrants. They put together a spray drift task force. They're trying to get separate labeling for UAV, but right now, the way that it's being interpreted is that UAVs have to follow these aerial, anything on the label with the aerial instructions. So if you're using a UAV and it says 150-foot buffer to water, you must follow that aerial buffer. Other changes that we're going to see coming to the chlorothalonil labels are these bulletins. So this is a new product that we're going to start to see these BLT Bulletin Live 2 labeling. And again, this is if it's on the label, it's an extension of the label. The label is the law. If there's a bulletin, you are required to check it. Now, they've come forward and said right now there's actually no there's no listed species bulletins for chlorothalonil, but the bulletin language is going to be on there. So it's kind of, I guess, a training exercise because who knows when those listed species are going to appear. So it will have this language on it. You'll have to go to the website. Eventually, it's going to be used to implement a biological opinion from the National Marine Fisheries and any new mitigations that come out. Other changes that are coming, spray drift mitigation, applicators must not spray during temperature inversions, and for ground applications, do not apply when the wind speed exceed 10 or are below 3. So this is something that I have never seen before. I spend, half my life reading pesticide labels. I've never seen a lower end. It's common to say don't spray when the wind's above 10 or above 15, but I've never seen don't spray below 3 miles per hour. So the idea is that if you have a dead calm, it's actually can exacerbate drift because you get these temperature inversions and those droplets don't break and they can float for long distances. So technically, you have to spray when your wind is between 10 and 3. There's some language on there about measuring wind speeds. You can read those when they come out. And it's going to be interesting. This is really going to be a mixed bag for a while. So um, as I mentioned, the registrants have 60 days to implement the new labels. Then EPA needs to approve the labels and then they need to get put on products. So right now, if you go to the store and you buy some chlorothalonil, Bravo, Equus, whatever you're using, there's going to be the old label that says 15 pounds AI acre year max. No BLT, no endangered species language on it. 2 months from now, you could go buy a jug and it might have a new label on it. So what they have told us is that you are legally bound by the label that is attached to the product that you are using. So you have to read the label. So if you have a bunch of chlorothalonil with the old label on it, you can use the old max. If you buy new and it has the new max on it, you have to go by that. So eventually all the channels of trade will be clear and there'll be only new product out there, but it's going to be a mixed bag for a while. So again, you're going to have to be checking these labels really closely if you are using that. Another regulatory update for our fungicides is mancozeb is another one of our broad spectrum fungicides, very important for lots of reasons. This is another one we were almost a little bit worried that we could lose it. Again, it has a lot of baggage with it. It's an older compound. There's known risks. Luckily, we saw the proposed interim decision. So the proposed interim decision is what they want to do. We made comments. They are mulling over comments. We have not seen the interim decision. So until we see that, we don't know what the label is going to actually say. We've only seen what they've proposed to do. But in the proposed label, really all they've done is they've increased PPE. So they're adding a respirator for the liquid compounds. And this doesn't really apply to you, but if you're doing chemigation or aerial applications, you need to do closed loading if you're using a wettable powder or dry flowable. They're going to increase the REI from 24 hours to 4 days, and they're adding spray buffers for this one as well. Skip over this. Some other regulatory updates. We did see a proposed interim decision for acephate. Again, this is proposed. We haven't actually seen the interim decision. All of the organophosphates are part of a mega lawsuit against EPA. And this one has a lot of health baggage with it, as we know all the OPs do. They've identified many points of concern to human health specifically. And at the time we saw this document, they have proposed canceling all uses except tree injection. So not just cranberry, everything across the board. And you know, we really engage with the cranberry entomologists in all the different regions. We talk to the registrant, we talk to the USDA, we talk to the registrants, put together this big acephate task force where they all came together to kind of problem solve and share data. And basically all the people that we talked to were optimistic that there could be a path forward for us to retain cranberry use. So it's not extensively used anywhere in the cranberry growing world, yet it's still important as we're starting to see the loss of other OPs. And we know that we have a need for broad spectrum insecticides to deal with emerging issues. And this one has pre-bloom use on the label. It has a fit, and it's important, especially if we lose everything else. So we're fighting to keep this one. For IR4, this is the vehicle through which we get new products. So that they focus on specialty crops. Again, most registrants are thinking about where they're going to make the money, corn, wheat, soy. So for specialty crops, fruits and there's lots of different things that are considered specialty crops. Our main vehicle for getting new things is going through this IR4 process. So IR4 works with the registrants and we prioritize projects. We go there and we kind of fight for for things that we want. And if we do get an A priority, then IR4 does the residue work. And we put another fruit rot fungicide forward last year, and we were able to secure an A priority, which means that field trials will be starting this summer to generate the residue data that's needed. Now, once something is in the IR4 pipeline, it can be years and years until we actually see a label. It is not a quick process by any means, but it's the channels that we need to go through to get new things. So there are 3 other fruit rot fungicides in the pipeline now. One is very close to registration. It has 2 new frac groups. It was recently registered in Canada. We have the tolerances. We just don't have a stamped label yet. So we're expecting to see a product label and a product registered hopefully sometime in April. Again, there's lots going on at EPA right now. They are understaffed. They are having reductions in staff, and I don't know what this is going to do to our registration pipeline. Some other pesticide updates. We have 2 novel herbicides in the pipeline. Both are close. The IR4 is completed. They have both gone through all of the lab work needed. They have gone back to the registrant. The registrant has written in the report. They've submitted it. They are just on a desk somewhere at EPA. We are waiting patiently for these 2 things to come through. There are 2 novel insecticides in the pipeline. These insecticides, interestingly, neither one of these is an IR4 project. These are both manufacturer objectives. So the manufacturers of these products are, we're gonna planning on labeling in strawberry and other small fruits, and they have added cranberry to the things that they would like to label it for. So the entomologists are working with these 2 registrants, doing screening trials, trying to come up with crop safety and efficacy data to support these products. Just to note that Post is being phased out. This is a BASF product. It's been around for ages and ages. It's a grass herbicide. It works really well. There's just very low market presence and pressure because there's so many clethodim products out there. So BASF has told us they have enough product in their channels of trade to meet customer needs for 2025, and then they're just gonna kind of let their stock run out. The state registrations for Post will expire at the end of 2027. So if you like Post, don't go hoard it because even though, the tolerance is there and the label is there, once the state registrations expire, they're not going to pay money to renew them. And technically, you're not supposed to use something if there's no state registration for it. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about stocking up on pesticides that we are worried are going to disappear. It is in good regulatory standing, so it's possible that a third party may take it up and make another sethoxidin product, but we just don't know. At this point, this particular product is going away. And just another quick note, the 2025 CI pesticide charts are going to be out very soon. They are going to be done printing next week, I think, and then Anne will mail those out to you. I just wanted to point out here that we have added a column for methods. It's the second to last column here. And this is really because there are so many people interested in UAV application. And in some regions, they're doing chemigation or ground. Almost everything is, you can apply almost anything by boom. But for the other application methods, it's less clear and it varies quite a bit from product to product. So we've added a column here to help growers to make those kind of decisions. And at this point, I will take any questions.
Yeah, perfectly timed. If you have questions, unmute yourself and ask or drop them in the chat. Cesar Rodriguez Sauna mentions that a few New Jersey growers used acephate and good to keep in the toolbox. And I think we've seen that in Wisconsin as well. While fanfare has been the more prevalent, there are people who have used acephate, and it's good to, as you say, better to keep that as possible, as other things might not be remaining. Any other questions for Katie? These are always very, very useful sessions for me to keep us abreast of everything that's going on nationwide. Any other questions? I think I feel like you covered everything, and grateful to always have you to touch in with whenever we have questions. If anyone has, I did get a question here. Status of diazinon.
Okay, diazinon is in registration review. We have not seen a proposed interim decision. They expect that to happen in 2026. I don't know if that's going to be delayed. So once we see a proposed interim decision, we'll have at least 60 days to make comments on that. And then EPA has to consider all of the comments it's going to get from, 1,000 people, both pros and cons, and then they will put out an interim decision. Now, unlike what happened with the Loors ban was a one-off, it was a very strange thing. It was because they were sued when they canceled the tolerance before the label. That's not what's going to happen with diazinon. I've been told that it will go through the normal processes. So, we'll see the proposed interim decision, we'll know what they're going to do, then we'll see the interim decision. And then once that happens, there'll be some language on there, usually for channels of trade, and that allows the registrants to kind of sell whatever they have on the shelf. The tolerance will stay in place for another couple of years, but eventually the state registrations will expire. So we will have warning on that one. It won't be like a sudden, like you can't use this right now. Your stuff is now hazardous waste or whatever. We're not going to lose it that way, but it's almost a guarantee that we're going to lose it. The registrant, is not supporting the fight for it, basically. They would have to spend a lot of money and generate a lot of data to do that, and they're kind of letting it go. So if they're not going to fight for it, then we don't really have a chance to retain that one. I think across the board, we're going to see that one go.
One quick question just on the process of these things. If they make requests for comments, do the growers watch out for an email from you to submit comments? Do they watch out for an email from Ann Coate? Do you reach out to me and then I pass that on to growers? How do growers know when their comments are being requested?
So usually when their comment period is open, CI submits comments like on behalf of the industry, but we work really closely with Grant and with all the growers associations. So usually when a letter from the Cranberry Institute goes into EPA, it's signed on by the Wisconsin, by, your growers association, Massachusetts, New Jersey. So, they're not necessarily looking for individual comments from growers. Not that growers can't do that, but we try to make our comments cover all the
The region.
growers.
Yeah,
Yeah, the best interest of the cranberry industry as a whole.
perfect. I also got a question about whether Imidan is still approved for use.
Is that FOSMET? Yes.
I believe so. Let me double.
Okay, then yes, that one is also going to go through registration review, but we have not seen that one yet. So eventually. So what's on the chopping block now is acephate. So then probably Fosmet and then diazinon. So they'll all eventually be, I think all the OPs are in some serious jeopardy for everyone, not just cranberry.
Okay. And Cesar also confirms that yes, it's Fosmet. Any other questions for Katie? Otherwise, we can wrap things up on the pesticide front and move along into the everything to do with keeping trucking rolling smoothly. So any other questions for Katie? Otherwise, I guess I'll go ahead and stop sharing again and pass things off to Chris Slechta. But thank you so much, Katie. Really good to get those updates. Really good to stay in the loop with everything that you're working on. And of course, whenever you have questions, Wisconsin's grower group is always very happy to chip in and let you know what we're working on, what we need the most, what we're using the most. So glad to have a strong relationship there. Thank Katie as well for her presentation in the first half of this hour. And as always, and with everything, feel free to reach out when you have questions. I'm very grateful for your time this morning and your expertise in the world of keeping everybody safe and keeping everybody within the realms of what our state statutes let us do. So thank you very much.